There is a state of consciousness that has been described in every major spiritual tradition on earth by different names in different languages across thousands of years. The Hindus called it Turiya, the fourth state beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. The Christian mystics called it resting in God. The Hermetic tradition called it the mind of the all. And a man named Neville Goddard, who was lecturing in New York City in the middle of the 20th century, called it I am, just the pure awareness of being, before any condition is attached to it. And Neville made a claim that most of his audience couldn't fully absorb at the time. He said that this state, this unconditioned awareness of simply being, is God, not a God somewhere else or some kind of a force that's outside of you. He meant the awareness reading these words right now. And when you learn to rest in that awareness without attaching conditions to it, reality doesn't resist you anymore, it obeys. Because you've stopped asking creation to give you something and started remembering that you are creation itself. Now that's a big claim, and I'm going to spend this video grounding it in something you can actually feel and use, not just understand intellectually. Because intellectual understanding of I am has never changed anyone's life. But inhabiting the state of I am has changed everything for the people who've learned to do it. Let's start with the distinction that makes all of this work. The distinction between I am and I am something. Right now, you have an identity, a collection of statements about yourself that you believe to be true. I am a man, I am a woman, I am 35 years old, I am a parent, I am struggling financially, I am getting better, I am not good enough, I am working on myself. Every one of those is a condition attached to the pure awareness of I am. And every one of those conditions, including the positive ones, is a limitation. Think about that for a moment. Even I am wealthy is a limitation, because it defines you as a self that is wealthy, which implies the existence of a self that could be not wealthy. It draws a boundary. It says, I am this, not that. And boundaries, by definition, are limits. They restrict the infinite into the finite. They collapse the unlimited creative potential of awareness into one specific configuration. And that's exactly what happens with most manifestation practice. You take the infinite creative power of I am and you narrow it. I am wealthy. I am loved. I am confident. You're taking God and giving it a costume. And the costume works to a degree. Neville taught his students to add conditions to I am all the time. I am in Barbados. I am living in my dream home. And it produced results. But there's a level beneath the costume that most practitioners never reach, and that level is where the real authority lives. Because when you say, I am wealthy from a state that doesn't genuinely feel wealthy, your nervous system detects the incongruence. Your subconscious reads the gap between the stated condition and the felt reality. Your anterior cingulate cortex, the conflict monitor in your brain, generates a signal of mismatch. And the whole system starts arguing with the affirmation rather than accepting it. The condition you attach to, I am, gets rejected because the evidence contradicts it. But when you rest in I am without any condition, there's nothing to argue with. There's no claim being made. There's no gap to detect. There's no statement for the critical mind to evaluate and reject. You're simply aware that you exist, and that awareness, that bare fact of being, is so fundamental and so undeniable that your entire system accepts it without resistance, because it's true. You are. Nobody can argue with that. Not your conscious mind, not your subconscious, not your nervous system, not your anterior cingulate cortex. The statement, I am, is the one signal that passes through every filter in your psychology without generating a single conflict response. And this is the state that Neville was pointing to as the source of all creative power, not a specific identity, not a technique, the awareness that precedes all identities and all techniques, the I that remains when every label, every story, every condition has been stripped away. What's left? Something. Something is still aware. Something is still present. Something still exists. And that something is what every tradition on earth has called by a different name. Neville Goddard put it in his own language. He said, your imagination is God. It is the only creative power in the universe. And when Neville said imagination, he didn't mean the mental movies people construct during visualization. He meant the deeper faculty of awareness that can assume any state, inhabit any reality, and feel any condition as real before it exists physically. That faculty is I am, and it is the source of everything you see around you. Not the result of it, the source. Now here's the practical question. If I am is the creative source, and you've been aware of being your entire life, why hasn't your reality been obeying you? Why does it take effort? Why does it take techniques? Why do you struggle? The answer is that your I am got contaminated, not destroyed, contaminated, covered over, conditioned. When you were born, you existed in pure I am. An infant has no narrative self, no story, no conditions attached to being. The baby doesn't think I am small or I am helpless or I am unworthy. The baby just is. Pure awareness without labels. And in that state, the baby's needs are met effortlessly. Not because babies are lucky, because unconditioned awareness has no resistance. There's no countersignal. There's no internal argument. Reality responds to the pure signal without obstruction. And then conditioning begins. Parents, teachers, siblings, playground dynamics, early experiences of failure and rejection and success and praise, all of them start attaching conditions to the I am. You are smart. You are slow. You are too much. You are not enough. Why can't you be more like your brother? People like us don't do that. And the child, operating in theta brainwave state with no critical filter, absorbs every single condition as gospel truth. The child doesn't evaluate these statements. The child doesn't think, well, that's just one person's opinion. The child takes the condition and grafts it directly onto the I am, and it becomes part of the identity. Over years and decades, the conditions accumulate, layer upon layer upon layer, until the original I am is buried so deep beneath conditions that you forget it's there. You start believing that the conditions are you. You start thinking, I am not enough is a fundamental truth about your being, a feature of your DNA, an unchangeable fact of existence when it's actually just a sticker someone slapped on your awareness when you were 4 years old and you couldn't peel it off because you didn't know it was a sticker. You thought it was your skin. Every limiting belief you carry is a corrupted I am statement. I am not worthy. I am always broke. I am bad at relationships. I am the kind of person who gets close but never quite makes it. These aren't descriptions of reality. They're conditions attached to the unconditioned. And because they're attached to I am, the creative power of I am flows into them and makes them real. Not because they're true in any objective sense. Because I am gives reality to whatever it's attached to. That's what it does. That's its nature. It is the creative power. It's the only creative power. And whatever follows I am gets created. Not because the universe evaluates the statement and decides it's valid. Because consciousness doesn't filter, it creates indiscriminately. Whatever you fuse with, I am becomes your experience, good or bad, chosen or inherited, examined or automatic. This is why Neville was so specific about guarding what follows I am in your inner dialogue. Because every unexamined I am plus a limitation is a creative act. You're not describing yourself, you're building yourself. And most people are building a prison out of inherited conditions they never chose and never questioned. So the path back to the state where reality obeys is not forward through more techniques, it's backward through fewer conditions. It's the process of peeling the stickers off your awareness until you reach the surface underneath. The I am without additions. The pure being that existed before anyone told you who you were. And there's neuroscience that supports this framework, even though the researchers studying it would never use the language I'm using here. The default mode network, the set of brain regions responsible for constructing and maintaining your narrative self, your story, your sense of who you are and where you fit in the world, this network is what generates and reinforces all the conditions attached to your I am. Every time you ruminate, compare yourself to others, replay past failures, or worry about future outcomes, the DMN is active. It's running the story. The conditioned identity. Meditation researchers have discovered that long-term meditators show significantly reduced activity in the default mode network during practice. And what these meditators consistently report during periods of DMN quieting is not blankness or void. They report pure awareness, spacious presence, the sense of I exist without any story about what I am. They describe exactly what Neville called the I am state and what the Hindus called Turiya. The neuroscience and the mysticism are measuring the same phenomenon from different sides of the same wall. So, what does this state actually feel like when you enter it? Because you need to recognize it when it arrives, not just understand the theory behind it, and it will arrive subtly, not as a lightning bolt, as a quiet opening that your mind might try to dismiss as nothing because it was expecting something dramatic. It feels spacious, not empty, spacious, like standing in a room with no walls. There's no edge to your awareness, no boundary where you end and the world begins. The usual sense of being a small self contained inside a body, looking out through eyes at a separate world, softens. It doesn't disappear entirely, it just loosens, like a fist unclenching. The mental chatter has gone quiet, not because you suppressed it, not because you meditated it into submission, but because there's no story to tell. The narrative machine has nothing to narrate because you've stopped feeding it conditions. It feels warm. Not emotional warmth like love or affection directed at something. A subtler warmth, the warmth of existing, the quiet aliveness of being aware without needing to be aware of anything specific. Just the hum of presence, the feeling you have in the first fraction of a second after waking up before you remember your name, your problems, your plans. That brief instant of pure being before the conditions load. That's a flash of I am. And in the practice, you learn to extend that flash into minutes and eventually into a sustained state. And it feels authoritative. This is the part that surprises people. There's a quality of quiet, natural, unforced authority in the unconditioned I am that doesn't exist in any conditioned identity. Because conditioned identities are always defending themselves, proving themselves, comparing themselves, measuring their progress, evaluating their worthiness, but unconditioned awareness has nothing to prove and no one to prove it to. It simply is. And that quality of simply being, without apology, without justification, without the need for anyone or anything outside itself to confirm its existence, is the frequency that reality responds to as a command rather than a request, not a loud command, not a forceful command. The quiet command of something that knows what it is without needing to argue the point. The practical method for entering this state and creating from it is simpler than anything you've practiced before. And that simplicity is what makes it difficult, because the mind wants complexity. The mind wants steps, sequences, protocols, but I am doesn't need steps, it needs subtraction. Settle the body, extended exhale breathing, let the nervous system come down from whatever sympathetic activation the day has produced. Give the body permission to feel safe. This is the soil preparation, the same as every practice. You can't access the unconditioned while the body is running on cortisol. Then let the narrative quiet. Don't fight your thoughts. Don't try to stop thinking. Just withdraw your interest from the story. The way you'd stop paying attention to a television playing in the background. You don't turn it off. You just stop watching. The thoughts continue, but you're no longer investing in them. You're no longer feeding them with attention. And without attention, they fade on their own. And then notice what remains. When the story goes quiet, something is still there. Something is still aware. Something is still present. It doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a shape. It doesn't have a condition. It's just being. Just I am. And you rest there. Not for a purpose, not as a technique to get something, just rest. Because resting in what you are is the most natural state available to a human being. It's the state you came into the world in, the state you return to in dreamless sleep, the state that has been underneath every conditioned identity your entire life, waiting for you to peel back the layers and find it again. And then, from that open, unconditioned space, you do something very gentle. You assume the state of the wish fulfilled, not with effort, not by constructing a detailed scene. You let the desired condition form naturally within the spacious I am, the way a cloud forms in an open sky. The sky doesn't strain to produce the cloud. The sky is just space. And within that space, the cloud takes shape on its own. You allow I am to gently become I am, plus the fulfilled condition, not by forcing the condition onto awareness, by letting awareness naturally assume the shape of what it desires, from the inside, without resistance, without argument, without the narrative self-stepping in to say, but that's not true yet. And then you rest. Or you drift off to sleep if it's evening, and the I am, which is the source of all creative power, which is consciousness itself, which is what every tradition has recognized as the fundamental force behind physical reality, carries the assumed state into manifestation with an authority that no technique performed from a conditioned identity could ever match. Because the technique was always trying to get you here. Every visualization, every affirmation, every sleep state practice, every method you've ever learned was a road designed to deliver you to this one address. The unconditioned I am, the awareness before the conditions, the creator before the creation. And now you know the address. You don't need the road anymore. You can just go home. Reality was never withholding from you. It was waiting for you to stop telling it who you were and start being what you are. And what you are needs no technique. What you are needs only to remember itself.